The silent dream was dying. Captain Rin stood on the bridge of her ship and watched the warning lights flash red across every console. The air smelled wrong. It smelled like burning metal and fear. She had been a captain for 40 years, and she knew that smell very well. It was the smell of death coming closer. The reactor had failed 3 hours ago. A small crack in the cooling system had become a big crack, and then the whole thing had broken apart. Now radiation was leaking into the lower decks. The engines were dead. Life support was running on emergency power, and that power would not last forever. Worse than all of this was the star. Through the main window, Rin could see it. A dying red giant, massive and hungry. Its gravity was pulling the silent dream closer with every passing minute. In 12 hours, maybe less, they would fall into it. The ship would melt. The crew would burn. There would be nothing left of them. Rin closed her 4 eyes slowly. She was old. She had seen many things in her long life. She had survived 2 wars and countless dangers, but she had never felt so helpless. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in silence. There were only 3 of them left. Tal, the young engineer, was trying desperately to fix something that could not be fixed. Knox, the medical officer, was treating Lore, their pilot, who had been knocked unconscious when the reactor exploded. They were all going to die, and there was nothing Rin could do about it. Tal slammed his hand against his console in frustration. His blue skin had turned pale from stress, and his long fingers were shaking. He was young, barely 30 cycles old. He should not die here, Rin thought. None of them should. "The engines are completely dead," Tal said. His voice was bitter and angry. "I cannot fix them. I cannot fix anything. We do not have the parts. We do not have the power. We do not have time." Rin nodded slowly. She had expected this. "What about the distress signal?" Tal laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The communication array is damaged, but I managed to send out a signal on all frequencies. It is weak. It might not reach anyone." "And even if it does," Knox said quietly from where she knelt beside Lore, "who would come?" That was the real question. The Velari were not popular in this part of the galaxy. They had been at war with the Corvic Empire for 200 years. They had fought border conflicts with the Mashi Collective. They had made enemies everywhere they went. No one would risk their ship and their crew to save a Velari vessel. No one would enter this dead zone of space, so far from any trade route or colony, to rescue people they probably hated. Rin understood this. She accepted it, but she would not let her crew see her despair. "We send the signal anyway," she said firmly. "We do everything we can until the very end. That is who we are." Tal looked at her with something like pity in his dark eyes. "Captain, with respect, we should prepare for death. We should record our final messages for our families. We should." "We should keep fighting," Rin interrupted. "That is an order." Tal fell silent. He turned back to his console and continued working, even though they both knew it was useless. The hours passed slowly. Knox managed to stabilize Lore, but he remained unconscious. Tal tried 100 different things to restart the engines, and 100 times he failed. Rin stood at the window and watched the red star grow larger. She thought about her home. She thought about her daughter, who was probably worried about her. She thought about all the things she would never do and all the words she would never say. Then the communication console made a sound. It was a small sound, a simple beep that meant an incoming signal. Tal stared at it like he had never seen it before. "That is impossible," he whispered. Rin moved quickly across the bridge. "What is it?" "Someone is responding to our distress call." Tal's fingers danced across the console. "The signal is weak, but it is definitely a response. Someone is out there." Hope flickered in Rin's chest. She had not felt hope in hours. It felt strange and painful, like blood returning to a numb limb. "Who?" she demanded. "Velari fleet, a trade ship." Tal shook his head slowly. His face had gone from pale to completely white. No, the ship is small, unregistered, no faction markings. He looked up at Rin with fear in his eyes. Captain, the origin species is listed as human. The word hit Rin like a physical blow. Behind her, Nox made a sound of pure terror. Human. Every species in the galaxy knew about humans. They were the Death Worlders, the monsters from the Poison Planet. They came from a world of extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, and deadly radiation. They breathed oxygen, which was a poison to many species. They drank water that would kill a Velari in minutes. The stories about humans were terrifying. They said humans could survive wounds that would kill any other species. They said humans hunted for sport, chasing their prey for hours until it collapsed from exhaustion. They said humans felt no pain, no fear, no mercy. The Velari had never met a human in person. They had only heard rumors and legends, but those rumors were enough to make Tal back away from his console like it might bite him. "We cannot let them dock," he said quickly. "Captain, this is worse than dying in the star. At least the star will be quick. The humans will." "Will what?" Rin asked quietly. The communication console crackled. A voice came through the speakers. It was a strange voice, speaking broken galactic common with an accent Rin had never heard before. The words were simple and direct. "This is Unipark of the Wanderer. I received your distress call. Hold your position, I'm coming." Silence filled the bridge. Tal stared at the console. Nox stopped breathing. Even the dying ship seemed to pause. Rin spoke first. "How far away are you?" The voice came back, calm and steady. 2 hours, maybe less if I push my engines. What is your situation?" Tal grabbed Rin's arm. "Captain, do not answer. Do not tell them anything. We do not know what they want." Rin pulled her arm free. She looked at the red star growing closer. She looked at Lore unconscious on the floor. She looked at Nox and Tal, both frozen with fear. They were going to die, that was certain. The star would kill them in 12 hours, maybe less. But the human would arrive in 2. It was not really a choice. It was a gamble. Death was coming either way. The only question was which death they preferred. Rin pressed the communication button. "We have a reactor leak. Engines are dead. Life support is failing. We are being pulled toward the star. We have 4 crew members, 1 injured." There was a pause. Then the human voice returned. "Understood. Keep your life support running as long as you can. Seal off the contaminated areas. I will be there soon." The signal went quiet. Tal was still staring at Rin with horror in his eyes. "You invited a Death Worlder onto our ship," he said. "You have killed us all." Rin turned back to the window. The red star burned in the darkness, hungry and patient. "We were already dead," she said softly. "Now at least we have a chance." She did not know if she believed that. She did not know what the human wanted or what it would do when it arrived. But she knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next would be better than waiting to burn. The 2 hours felt like 2 years. Tal spent most of that time packing back and forth across the bridge. He could not sit still. He could not focus on repairs. All he could think about was the human coming toward them through the darkness of space. He had grown up hearing stories about humans. Every Velari child did. Parents told those stories to frighten their children into behaving. The humans were the monsters under the bed, the shadows in the corner, the creatures that waited in the dark. They said humans came from a world so dangerous that most species would die within minutes of landing on it. The gravity was crushing. The air was poison. The water was death. And somehow, against all logic and reason, the humans had evolved to survive there. They said humans were made of something harder than metal. They said humans could lose an arm and keep fighting. They said humans could run for days without stopping, chasing their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion and terror. They said humans were predators of the worst kind, patient, clever, unstoppable. And now one was coming to their ship. Nox tried to stay calm. She focused on caring for Lore, checking his vital signs and adjusting his medication. But her hands were shaking, and she kept looking at the airlock door like it might open at any moment. Captain Rin stood at the window, watching the stars. She seemed calm, but Tal knew her well enough to see the tension in her shoulders and the tightness around her eyes. She was afraid, too. She was just better at hiding it. "Maybe we should prepare weapons," Tal said suddenly. Rin turned to look at him. "What weapons? Our security officer died in the explosion. Our weapons locker was on the lower deck, which is now filled with radiation." "Then we should prepare something. Anything." Tal's voice was rising with panic. "We cannot just let this creature walk onto our ship and do whatever it wants to us." "What do you suggest we do?" Rin asked quietly. "Attack it, kill it. And then what? We still have no engines. We are still falling into the star. The human is our only chance of survival, Tal, whether you like it or not." Tal wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He hated that she was right. He hated everything about this situation. The ship shuddered suddenly. Everyone froze. "What was that?" Knox whispered. Tal checked his console with trembling fingers. "A ship is docking with us. It is small, very small, only large enough for 1 or 2 people." "The human," Rin said. They waited in silence. The ship shuddered again as the docking clamps locked into place. Then there was the sound of the airlock cycling, air hissing and metal groaning. Footsteps. Someone was walking through their ship. The footsteps were slow and steady, not rushing, not sneaking, just walking like the human had all the time in the world. Tal moved to stand between the bridge door and Knox. He did not have a weapon, but he would protect her with his bare hands if he had to. He would die fighting if that was what it took. The bridge door slid open. The human stepped through. Tal did not know what he had expected. A monster, probably. Something tall and terrifying, with claws and fangs and eyes full of hunger. What he saw was something much smaller. The human was short, shorter than any of the Velari. She wore a battered pressure suit that looked old and worn, covered in patches and repairs. Her face was hidden behind a helmet with a scratched visor. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around the bridge. Her gaze moved from Tal to Knox to Lore lying unconscious on the floor. Finally, she looked at Captain Rin. Then she reached up and removed her helmet. Tal had never seen a human face before. It was strange and alien. The skin was a warm brown color, and the hair was black and pulled back from her face. She had 2 eyes like a Velari, but they were dark and round instead of oval. Her face was small and soft, with none of the sharp edges or hard angles he had expected. She did not look like a monster. She looked tired. The human spoke. Her galactic common was slow and careful, with that strange accent he had heard over the communication channel. "My name is Una Park. I am here to help." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They all just stared at her like she might attack at any moment. Una looked at them for a long moment. Then she sighed softly. "I understand that you are afraid," she said. "You have heard stories about my kind. Most of those stories are probably not true, but I do not have time to convince you of that right now. Your ship is dying, and so are you." She looked around the bridge again. "What is broken?" Captain Rin was the first to recover. She stepped forward slowly, keeping her movements calm and non-threatening. "The reactor is leaking radiation. The engines are dead. Life support is failing. We have maybe 6 hours before we fall into the star." Una nodded. Her face did not change expression. "Take me to the reactor." Tal stepped forward. He could not help himself. The fear was too strong. "Wait," he said. His voice was harder than he intended. "Before we take you anywhere, I want to know something. Why are you here? Why did you answer our distress call?" Una looked at him. Her dark eyes met his, and Tal felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in those eyes, not anger, not hunger, just a kind of calm steadiness that made him feel very small. I was in the area, she said simply. I heard your call, you needed help, I came. That is not an answer, Tal pressed. No one helps strangers in this part of space. No one risks their life for nothing. What do you want from us? Money, information, our ship. Yuna tilted her head slightly. Your ship is broken. What would I want with it? Then what do you want? Yuna was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. I have been alone in space for a long time. I have passed many distress calls from many species. Most of them did not want help from a human. They would rather die than let me near them. She paused. You answered my reply. You let me dock. That takes courage or desperation. Either way, I respect it. She looked at Tal directly. I do not want anything from you. I just do not like watching people die when I can do something about it. That is all. That is the only reason I am here. Tal did not know what to say. He had been ready for threats. He had been ready for demands. He had not been ready for this. Captain Rin spoke into the silence. The reactor is on the lower deck. Follow me. She walked past Tal without looking at him. Yuna followed, her footsteps quiet on the metal floor. Tal stayed where he was, frozen with confusion and fear. Nox came to stand beside him. What do we do? She whispered. Tal shook his head slowly. I do not know. I do not understand this creature at all. They followed the captain and the human down into the dying ship. The lights flickered around them. The air grew colder. The smell of burning metal grew stronger. They stopped outside the reactor room. Through the reinforced window they could see the damage, twisted metal, broken pipes, and everywhere the invisible poison of radiation filling the air. Yuna studied the reactor for a long moment. Her face was calm, but Tal could see her thinking, calculating. The leak is in the central cooling chamber, she said finally. It needs to be sealed manually. The components need to be replaced by hand. That is not possible, Tal said. The radiation levels inside that chamber would kill a Velari in 3 minutes. Less, probably. Yuna turned to look at him. There was something in her eyes that Tal could not read. I know, she said. That is why I will do it. The words hung in the air. Tal stared at her, waiting for the joke, the trick, the trap. But there was no joke. The human just stood there, looking at the broken reactor like it was a puzzle she needed to solve. You will die, Tal said. Yuna shrugged. It was a small movement, almost casual. Maybe, she said. Maybe not. Humans are a little different. She started walking toward the reactor chamber door. Tal watched her go, his mind spinning with confusion. This was not how monsters were supposed to behave. This was not what the stories had told him. He did not understand this creature at all. Nox stepped forward before Yuna could reach the reactor chamber door. Her medical training would not let her stay silent. Stop, she said. Her voice was shaking, but she forced herself to speak. The radiation levels inside that chamber are beyond lethal. You will die in there. No species can survive that kind of exposure. It is simply not possible. Yuna stopped walking. She turned to look at Nox with those strange dark eyes. What are the exact levels? She asked. Nox checked her medical scanner. The numbers made her feel sick. Over 1,200 rads per minute. Lethal dose for a Velari is 50 rads. You would receive a lethal dose in less than 3 seconds. Yuna nodded slowly. She did not seem surprised or afraid. She just accepted the information like it was a weather report. Humans are different, she said again. We evolved on a planet with high radiation from our sun. Our cells repair damage faster than most species. The exposure will hurt me. It will probably take years off my life, but I will not die in there. Tal made a sound of disbelief. That is impossible. You are lying. Yuna looked at him calmly. I am not lying, but I understand why you do not believe me. You do not have to believe me. You just have to let me try. Captain Rin stepped forward. Her face was troubled. She had lived a long time, and she had learned to read people. This human did not seem like a liar, but what she was saying went against everything Rin knew about biology. "If you go in there and die," Rin said slowly, "we lose our only chance of survival. Your ship has engines. If you die, we cannot use them to escape." Yuna smiled slightly. It was a small smile, tired and sad. "My ship's engines are too weak to pull your ship out of the star's gravity. The only way you survive is if I fix your reactor and restart your engines." She paused. "I know the risk. I am choosing to take it anyway." "Why?" The question burst out of Tal before he could stop it. "Why would you risk your life for strangers? For Velari, we are not your people, we are not your allies. Most of the galaxy hates us. Why would you die for us?" Yuna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "When I was young, my family was on a ship that lost power in deep space. We sent out a distress call. No one answered. We drifted for 12 days before another ship finally found us. My mother died on the 9th day." She looked at Tal with those dark, steady eyes. "I do not want anyone to feel what I felt during those 12 days. I do not want anyone to die alone in the dark, calling for help that never comes." The words hit Tal like a physical blow. He had expected many things from the human. He had expected cruelty. He had expected selfishness. He had not expected this. Captain Rin made her decision. "Let her try," she said. "We have no other options." Tal wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat. Rin was right. They were all going to die anyway. At least this way there was a chance. Yuna nodded and walked to the reactor chamber door. She checked her suit carefully, making sure every seal was tight. Then she looked back at them one more time. "Monitor my vital signs through the chamber sensors," she said. "If I stop moving, do not open the door. The radiation would kill all of you instantly." Before anyone could respond, she opened the door and stepped inside. The next 45 minutes were the longest of Tal's life. He watched Yuna through the reinforced window. The radiation was invisible, but he knew it was there, filling the chamber like poison water. The human moved slowly and carefully, her hands steady as she examined the damaged components. Nox monitored Yuna's vital signs on her scanner. Her face grew paler with every passing minute. "Her heart rate is increasing," Nox reported. "Body temperature is rising. Cellular damage is beginning." Tal watched the human work. She moved with purpose, pulling broken pieces away and examining the damage underneath. Her movements were precise and efficient. "How is she still standing?" Tal whispered. "She has been in there for 10 minutes. Any Velari would be dead by now." "Humans are built differently," Nox said, her voice filled with wonder and horror. "Their cells regenerate faster. Their bodies can absorb more damage. They evolved on a death world. They are made to survive things that would kill us." 15 minutes passed, 20. Yuna's movements grew slower. Through the window, Tal could see her stumbling slightly. Her hands were shaking, but she did not stop working. At the 30-minute mark, Yuna vomited inside her helmet. Tal heard her coughing and choking through the communication channel, but she did not leave the chamber. She just wiped her face against her shoulder and kept working. "This is insane," Tal said. "She is killing herself." Captain Rin said nothing. She just watched the human with an expression Tal could not read. At 40 minutes, Yuna finished sealing the leak. She moved to the power distribution panel and started rerouting the emergency systems. Her movements were clumsy now, like she was moving through water, but her hands kept working. At 45 minutes, the reactor stabilized. The warning lights on the bridge changed from red to yellow. Power began flowing back into the ship's systems. Yuna stumbled toward the chamber door. She fell against it, her hands fumbling for the release. The door opened, and she collapsed on the deck outside. Nox was at her side immediately. She pulled off Yuna's helmet and gasped at what she saw. The human's face was pale and covered in sweat. Her eyes were bloodshot and unfocused. Blood trickled from her nose. Her skin was hot to the touch, almost burning. The cellular damage is severe, Knox said, her scanner moving over Yuna's body. Multiple organ systems are affected. Her body is fighting the radiation, but the damage is. She trailed off, unable to finish. Yuna coughed weakly. Her eyes focused slowly on Knox's face. "Did it work?" she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Knox nodded. Tears were forming in her eyes, though she did not know why. "The reactor is stable. You did it." Yuna smiled weakly. "Good, that is good." Then her eyes closed, and she stopped moving. Tal felt his heart stop. "Is she dead?" Knox checked her scanner frantically. "No, she is unconscious but alive. Her body is trying to repair itself." She looked up at Tal with amazement in her eyes. "The cellular regeneration is already beginning. I have never seen anything like it. Her body is healing itself in real time." Tal stared down at the unconscious human. She looked so small lying there on the deck, so fragile, and yet she had done something impossible. She had walked into a death chamber and survived. Captain Rin knelt beside Yuna. Her old hands were gentle as she touched the human's forehead. "What are you?" Rin whispered. "What are your people?" There was no answer. Yuna just lay there, her body fighting a battle no Velari could ever understand. Tal helped Knox carry Yuna to the medical bay. They laid her on a bed and connected her to the medical systems. The readings were strange and alien, but one thing was clear: the human was healing. Slowly, impossibly, she was putting herself back together. Tal stood beside the bed and watched her breathe. He thought about everything he had believed about humans, the stories, the legends, the monsters in the dark. This creature had just sacrificed years of her life to save strangers she had never met. She had walked into certain death without hesitation. She had done something that no Velari would ever do for an outsider. The stories had been wrong. The legends had been lies. Humans were not monsters. They were something else entirely, something Tal did not have a word for. He stood there for a long time, watching the impossible creature heal herself one cell at a time. And for the first time since the reactor had failed, he felt something that might have been hope. Yuna woke up 2 hours later. The first thing she saw was Knox standing over her, scanner in hand, staring at her with a mixture of amazement and confusion. "You should not be awake yet," Knox said. "Your body is still repairing itself. The damage was severe." Yuna sat up slowly. Everything hurt. Her bones ached. Her muscles burned. Her head felt like it was filled with broken glass, but she could move, and that was enough. "How long was I out?" she asked. 2 hours. Yuna cursed under her breath. 2 hours was too long. She swung her legs off the medical bed and tried to stand. Her legs shook beneath her, but she managed to stay upright. "What are you doing?" Knox demanded. "You need to rest. Your body needs time to heal." "No time," Yuna said. She forced herself to walk toward the door. "The reactor is stable, but the engines are still dead. We are still falling into the star. How long do we have?" Knox hesitated. 4 hours, maybe less. Yuna nodded grimly. 4 hours to fix engines that had been broken for days. 4 hours to escape a gravity well that should have been impossible to escape. 4 hours to do the impossible again. She walked out of the medical bay and headed for the engine room. Knox followed close behind, still protesting. Tal was already in the engine room when they arrived. He looked up as Yuna entered, and his expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, disbelief, and something that might have been respect. "You are awake," he said. "I noticed." Yuna walked past him to the main engine console. She studied the readings, her tired eyes moving across the displays. "Tell me what is wrong." Tal moved to stand beside her. He hesitated for a moment, then began explaining. The main drive was burned out. The secondary thrusters had lost power when the reactor failed. The fuel lines were intact, but there was no way to ignite the engines without a working power coupling. Yuna listened carefully. When Tal finished, she stared at the console in silence. "We need parts we do not have," Tal said bitterly. "I have been trying to fix this for hours. It cannot be done. The damage is too severe." Yuna did not respond immediately. She walked around the engine room looking at the various systems. She opened panels and peered inside. She touched wires and components, feeling their condition. Finally, she turned back to Tal. "We do not need to fix the engines," she said. "We just need them to work once. One big burn to push us out of the gravity well." Tal shook his head. "Even if we could restart them, the engines are not powerful enough. The star's gravity is too strong. We would need 3 times our normal thrust to escape." Yuna smiled slightly. It was a strange smile, tired but determined. "Then we make 3 times the thrust." She began explaining her plan. They would strip non-essential systems for parts. They would reroute all remaining power to the engines. They would bypass the safety limits and overload the drive beyond its design specifications. Then they would use the star itself. "A slingshot maneuver," Yuna said. "We fly closer to the star, using its gravity to accelerate us. At the closest point, we fire the engines at maximum power. The combination of our thrust and the gravitational acceleration should be enough to throw us free." Tal stared at her in horror. "That is suicide. If we fly closer to the star, the hull will start to melt. The engines will explode from the overload. Everything will fail." "Maybe," Yuna agreed. "But doing nothing means certain death. This way we have a chance." "A small chance." "A chance is a chance." Yuna met his eyes. "Where I come from, we have a saying, nothing is impossible. Some things are just expensive." Tal wanted to argue. Every part of his engineering training told him this plan was insane. The calculations were wrong. The margins were too thin. There were 100 ways it could fail. But then he looked at the readings. He looked at the star growing closer. He looked at the clock counting down their remaining time. They had no other options. Captain Rin's voice came over the communication system. "I heard the plan. Do it." Tal took a deep breath. "Fine, what do you need me to do?" The next 3 hours were a blur of desperate activity. Tal and Yuna worked side by side, stripping the ship of anything they did not absolutely need. They pulled panels from the walls. They disconnected backup systems. They rerouted power lines and bypassed safety protocols. They argued constantly. Tal's engineering knowledge was superior, but he kept getting stuck on problems he considered unsolvable. Yuna's approach was different. She did not care about elegant solutions or proper procedures. She only cared about what worked. "This is wrong," Tal said at one point, pointing at a bundle of wires Yuna had connected. "The power flow will be uneven. The system will burn out within minutes." "We only need it to work for 5 minutes," Yuna replied. "After that, we are either free or we are dead." Tal opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. She was right. This was not about building something to last. This was about surviving the next few hours. Nox helped where she could. She brought tools and supplies. She kept them fed and hydrated. And she checked on Yuna every few minutes, watching the human's vitals with growing concern. "Your body is still healing," Nox said during one of these checks. "The radiation damage is repairing, but you are pushing yourself too hard. If you do not rest, you could cause permanent harm." Yuna did not stop working. "I will rest when we are safe." "You might not survive until then." Yuna looked up at Nox. There was something in her eyes that Nox could not quite understand. Determination, yes, but also acceptance. Like she had already made peace with whatever was going to happen. "Then I will die knowing I tried," Yuna said simply. "That is enough for me." She went back to work. An hour before they reached the critical point, Lore woke up. The pilot's eyes opened slowly. He looked around in confusion, trying to understand where he was and what had happened. Nox was at his side immediately, explaining everything as quickly as she could. Lore listened in silence. When Knox finished, he struggled to sit up. "I need to be at the helm," he said. His voice was weak but steady. "If we are going to fly a maneuver like this, I should be the one flying it." "You are injured," Knox protested. "You can barely move." "I can move enough." Lore swung his legs off the bed. He winced in pain but did not stop. "I have been a pilot for 20 years. If we are going to do something impossible, I want to be the one at the controls." Captain Rin's voice came over the comm again. "Let him fly. If we are going to die, we should die with our best pilot at the helm." They helped Lore to the bridge. He settled into the pilot's seat with a sigh of relief, his hands moving over the controls with practiced ease. "The helm is damaged," he reported, "but I can still fly her, barely." Yuna and Tal finished the last modifications. Everything was ready. The engines were primed. The power was rooted. The slingshot trajectory was calculated. Now they just had to survive. Yuna made her way to the bridge. She was pale and shaking, blood still trickling from her nose, but she refused to sit down. "On my mark," Lore said. His hands were steady on the controls. "Firing engines in 3, 2, 1. The ship shuddered. The engines screamed. Through the windows, the red star filled the entire view, massive and terrifying. The hull began to groan. Warning alarms blared. The temperature inside the ship began to rise. "Approaching closest point," Lore said. His voice was calm despite everything. "Maximum thrust in 3, 2, 1, now." The engines roared. The ship lurched forward. Every surface vibrated with the strain. Yuna grabbed a console to steady herself. She watched the navigation display, watching their trajectory curve around the star. The numbers flickered. The ship screamed. And then suddenly silence. The engines died. The alarm stopped. The shaking ceased. Lore looked at the navigation display. Then he looked up at Captain Rin with wonder in his eyes. "We are clear," he said. "We escaped the gravity well. We are free." For a long moment nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They all just stood there, stunned by their own survival. Then Yuna collapsed. Knox caught her before she hit the floor. The human was barely conscious, her body finally giving out after everything it had endured. "Is she alive?" Tal asked. Knox checked her scanner. "Yes, but barely. She needs rest, real rest, not just a few hours on a medical bed." They carried Yuna back to the medical bay. This time, she did not wake up. But she was breathing, and so were they all. Against all odds, they had survived. The silent dream drifted through the calm darkness of space, far from the hungry red star that had nearly killed them all. The ship was damaged. The engines were dead again, burned out from the desperate escape. But they were alive, and that was more than any of them had expected. Yuna slept for 12 hours. Knox stayed by her side the entire time, monitoring her vital signs and watching the impossible process of human healing. The cellular damage from the radiation was slowly repairing itself. The internal injuries from the escape were fatting. It was like watching a miracle happen in slow motion. Tal came to check on the human several times. He did not say much. He just stood in the doorway and watched her breathe, his face unreadable. Captain Rin spent the time coordinating the rescue effort. She had managed to send a message to a Velari patrol ship that was 2 days away. Help was coming. They would survive. When Yuna finally woke up, it was quiet. The lights in the medical bay were dim. Knox was sitting beside her bed, half asleep in a chair. Yuna sat up slowly. Her body still ached, but the sharp pain was gone. She felt tired and weak, but alive. Definitely alive. Knox stirred and opened her eyes. When she saw Yuna awake, she smiled. "You scared us," Knox said softly. "We thought we might lose you." Yuna shrugged slightly. "I am harder to kill than I look." "I noticed." Knox leaned forward, her eyes curious. "I have been monitoring your recovery. Your healing ability is remarkable. I have never seen anything like it." It is just how humans work, Yuna said. Our bodies fight to survive. We evolved that way. On your death world. Yuna smiled slightly. Yes, on our death world. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Nox asked the question that had been bothering her for hours. Why did you really come? You said you heard our distress call and came to help, but there must be more to it. You risked your life for complete strangers. You almost died for us. I do not understand. Yuna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. I told you about my mother, about how she died when I was young, waiting for help that came too late. She paused. After that, I promised myself that I would never ignore a distress call. I would never let someone else feel what I felt. I would never let someone die alone if I could do anything about it. Nox felt tears forming in her eyes. That is a heavy promise to carry. It is, Yuna agreed, but it is mine and I would not change it. The door opened and Tal walked in. He stopped when he saw Yuna awake and something complicated crossed his face. Fear, respect, uncertainty, gratitude. He stood there for a moment, not speaking. Then he walked slowly toward the bed. I owe you an apology, he said. His voice was stiff, like the words were difficult to say. I was afraid of you. I believed the stories about humans. I thought you were a monster. Yuna looked at him calmly. And now? Tal hesitated. Now I do not know what to think. You are not what I expected. You are not what anyone expected. What did you expect? Cruelty, selfishness, violence. Tal shook his head slowly. Instead, you walked into a radiation chamber that should have killed you. You worked for hours to save strangers. You nearly died to give us a chance to live. He met her eyes. That is not what monsters do. Yuna smiled tiredly. I am glad you think so. Tal struggled with his next words. Finally, he said, I was wrong about you. I was wrong about humans, and I am sorry. It was a simple apology, but Yuna could see how much it cost him. He was not used to admitting he was wrong. He was not used to having his beliefs shattered. Thank you, she said. That means a lot. Captain Rin arrived a few minutes later. The old Velari walked slowly, her age showing in every step. But there was a new energy in her eyes, a kind of wonder that had not been there before. She stood at the foot of Yuna's bed and looked at the human for a long moment. Then, slowly and deliberately, she knelt. It was a gesture Yuna did not understand, but she could see from Nox and Tal's reactions that it was significant. Both of them gasped softly. Nox covered her mouth with her hands. Captain, Tal said, his voice shocked. What are you doing? Rin did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Yuna. This is the old way, Rin said. The way my people showed respect in ancient times before the wars and the hatred. It is rarely used now, but I believe it is appropriate. She placed her hand over her heart, her 4 eyes focused on Yuna. The galaxy calls your kind monsters, Rin said. They speak of humans with fear and hatred. They say you are dangerous. They say you are cruel. They say you are to be avoided at all costs. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. They are wrong. You are something far more terrifying than a monster. You are kind. You are brave. You are willing to sacrifice yourself for strangers. She bowed her head. I have lived for more than 100 cycles. I have seen many things, but I have never seen anything like you. Yuna did not know what to say. She looked at the old captain kneeling before her, and she felt something warm spreading through her chest. Please stand, she said softly. I do not deserve that kind of respect. Rin rose slowly. I disagree, but I will honor your wishes. The next 2 days passed quietly. The Velari patrol ship arrived and took the silent dream under tow. Lore recovered enough to walk around, though he still needed help. The crew began to relax as the reality of their survival sank in. Yuna spent most of her time in her own ship, the Wanderer. She was recovering her strength, preparing for the next journey. There was always another call, another crisis, another chance to help. On the last day, before the patrol ship took them to a proper station, Tal came to see her. He stood in the doorway of the Wanderer, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, "for everything." Yuna nodded. "You already thanked me." "I know, but I wanted to say something else." Tal hesitated, searching for the right words. "I have spent my whole life believing certain things about the universe, about different species, about who is good and who is evil. You have made me question all of that." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Yuna asked. Tal thought about it. "I think it is a good thing. I think I needed to have my beliefs challenged." He looked at her with something like hope in his eyes. Maybe the galaxy does not have to be the way it is. Maybe different species can help each other instead of fearing each other. Yuna smiled. "That is a nice thought." "Do you believe it?" Yuna considered the question carefully. "I believe that every person has a choice. We can choose fear or we can choose trust. We can choose hatred or we can choose kindness. The galaxy will be whatever we make it." Tal nodded slowly. "Then I choose to believe that it can be better." They shook hands. It was an awkward gesture, human and Velari not quite fitting together, but it meant something to both of them. Nox came to say goodbye next. She brought a small gift, a Velari medical scanner programmed with healing protocols. "In case you need to patch yourself up again," she said with a smile. "Humans seem to get hurt a lot." Yuna laughed. "We do, thank you." Nox hugged her. It was quick and tentative but genuine. "Be safe out there." "I will try." Captain Rin was the last to visit. She stood at the airlock of the Wanderer, looking at Yuna with those wise old eyes. "I will tell everyone what happened here," Rin said. "I will tell them about the human who saved us. I will tell them that the stories are wrong." Yuna shook her head. "You do not have to do that." "I know, but I want to." Rin smiled slightly. "The galaxy needs to know that there is another kind of human, not a monster, not a death worlder to be feared, just a person who cares about others." Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you, Captain." Rin extended her hand in the human gesture she had seen Yuna use with Tao. Yuna took it and shook it gently. "May you find peace among the stars," Rin said. It was an old Velari blessing, one usually reserved for family members. "And you," Yuna replied. The Wanderer detached from the silent dream and drifted away into the darkness. Yuna watched the Velari ship grow smaller in her viewscreen, surrounded by the patrol ship's protective embrace. She thought about the past few days, the fear in Tal's eyes when he first saw her, the desperation of the dying ship, the pain of the radiation chamber, the impossible escape from the star. She thought about the change she had seen in all of them, the way fear had become respect, the way hatred had become friendship. Maybe Tal was right. Maybe the galaxy could be different. Maybe it just took one person at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one hand extended in trust instead of raised in fear. Yuna set her course for the next sector of space. There were always more calls to answer, more people who needed help, more chances to make a difference. She flew alone through the vast emptiness, a single human in an ocean of stars. But she did not feel lonely. Somewhere behind her, 4 Velari were telling stories about a human who had saved them. Stories that would spread across the galaxy, changing minds and opening hearts. In the cold silence of space, a distress call had once echoed with despair. A human had answered, and nothing would ever be quite the same again.